All right, the king of Substack, Ethan Sherwood Strauss is here. What's it like to be the king of Substack? Is there like a crown? What do you get?
You get a mug, so that's nice. They send you a mug, and I got some swag. I just stopped by the Substack offices, and I got a onesie for the baby, a few
Nice.
hoodies. Yeah, I'm practically
Congrats.
king. Yeah, I'm like King Tut over here. It's very impressive.
That's great. Well, you should check out his Substack if you haven't read it. He has some always interesting thoughts about sports and especially basketball. Sometimes I disagree with you. I'll text you when I disagree. I'm like, I just disagree with what you wrote there. I asked you, what is a topic that we could talk about? And we settled on, is the NBA more or less valuable than people seem to think it is? Because this has been, I've heard people going hard both ways. And sometimes there's an agenda when people are going hard, but they're about to do this new deal. I was on Matt Bellany's podcast last week making predictions for it. I think there's going to be 3 suitors, not 2. I think they're probably going to at least double the total number of money they got, which doesn't necessarily mean they got double the amount of money. There's some thoughts on that. No, it's not actually double. It's only, but ultimately, the interest is pretty good for a league that, you know, you could kind of pick apart in some ways. You could say, oh, who is their best under 30 player? What's going to, where do you land on this topic, or do you want to talk it out?
Well, I think it's a fascinating topic because it's almost a paradox. I wrote in 2022 a story about the NBA called Half the Audience, Twice the Profits. It looks like it's going to be maybe even more than twice the profits. It is, as a share of the television audience, a less popular property than it was before. But at the same time, because of the crazy machinations in media and the fact that it's still popular enough, it is, I guess, increasingly valuable. And then it's got this weird value, Bill. I would call it the Ben Thompson theory. Ben Thompson, who's been a fantastic guest on your program, where one would think, as these cable companies, as ESPN, as Turner, as they lose more and more subscribers, as they go from 100 million people to 70 million people, that they would pay not as much money for sports rights. But the weird thing about it is it increases this desperation, totally counterintuitive, where they pay even more because they have less of an audience. It is a bizarre business.
Well, and then on top of it, here's the part. I don't know what the right answer is, but I've heard both sides of it, right? Ratings are going down. Less people are interested in basketball based on the viewing audience of basketball, which mirrors a lot of the viewing audience of like network TV, things like that. But when Derek Thompson came on and we talked about some version of this, and he was saying, I am a diehard basketball fan who doesn't watch basketball that much, but I love the whole circus of basketball. I love listening to podcasts about it. I like consuming the highlights of it. And I was saying, that's basically my son. My son barely ever watches basketball with me, but knows what's going on, knows who all the players is, has an Anthony Edwards opinion, and is just basically getting this through. So in some ways, the NBA fits in better than it ever has in whatever weird culture we've created, right? Way better than baseball. Yeah. Mike Trout went out for maybe the year, and people are like, I don't know what Mike Trout looks like. And whereas basketball, it's just constant. When you get to the Olympics, they're going to be some of the most famous people there. But yet the results aren't there from a who's watching standpoint. And yet they would go, but look at our social. Look at us on YouTube. Look at us on Snapchat. Like any other, big picture variable from 2020s, we're doing great. Yeah. And I don't know what to believe.
It's this weird thing where it's almost like there's this secondary market of yourself when it comes to a media property, where I have all these opinions on some of the NBA player podcasts, but similar to your kids, I've never actually sat down and listened to a full Jeff Teague podcast.
Right.
But I've seen all these clips on social media and on YouTube. And I guess basketball has more of a secondary market of itself than these other sports. And then there's this other aspect of it that's hard to quantify, which is how much do the personalities involved matter? How much do these companies want to be affiliated with the brand of the NBA, which is a cooler brand as they see it, to maybe even a more popular sport like college football? The reaction when college football signed its playoff deal was a lot of people going, wow, that's not for as much money as I thought. College football is having a moment. More and more people are watching it. But I don't know if college football is necessarily something that is as alluring as being connected to the NBA if you're Amazon, for instance. And
Yeah.
I don't know how you see these things. You're higher up in the business world than I am.
Oh, thanks,
But
Ethan.
the people know. But the older I get, the more I come to the conclusion that a lot of these deals are driven more by personality than I would have thought, and less economic imperative than I would have thought.
We have two other big factors coming, right? Where the expansion teams are coming the moment this deal gets done, right? And the expansion prices are going to be huge. The values of the franchises have also gone up, partly because of the media rights deal. So they could point to these different things and say, I mean, look at the money we just got from our three new TV partners. Look at the money we're going to get from these expansion teams. How could you not say we're doing well? I'm in the camp of they are doing well. But I also see some of the stuff that you've written about where you're like, whoa, football said, oh, you like Christmas? Cool. We're taking it. Like, that's it. Oh, Martin Luther King weekend, that Monday. Oh, you're going to make that your day? Cool. We're going to take that too. And they're just like taking days by force that matter in the NBA. And the NBA even retreated from Thursday, which was the holy day for regular seasons. Thursday, Chuck and Kenny and Ernie and a doubleheader. And football blew that out of the water. They retreated to Tuesdays until football's gone. So you see some stuff like that and you're like, well, they're not even remotely in the same vicinity as football.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think in 2016, they do those top 100 sports TV events of the year. And back then, I believe the NBA had 12 in the top 50. And I can't quite recall how many they had in the top 25, but they had a significant amount in the top 25.
So that was Curry versus LeBron in the finals, but also Curry versus KD and Westbrook in the Western final. Yeah, that was a good season.
Yeah, it was an era of the NBA that was a very cool era. And now that list comes out every year, and the NBA is just not even the top 100. It's just not even there. They're bounced from the top 50. So it represents how the NFL, on a relative basis, has just taken more territory relative to the other leagues, including, as you mentioned, Christmas, where the NFL goes, it's ours now. And they've almost
We're taking this.
Yes, it's ours. It's done. I think Goodell said something like, I don't have to ask permission when he was asked about it. Yeah. But at the same time, what's so crazy, Bill, is that if we look at the past decade, I believe when this deal is signed, by the time the ink is dry, the NBA TV rights would have gone up by a greater percentage than the NFL TV rights. So as much as Adam Silver might have made this or that misstep, maybe he's just a much better negotiator with these rights deals than Roger Goodell is. And maybe Roger Goodell is looking at the situation and wondering, hey, what's up with this? We are the NFL. We're getting $10 billion a year.
Yeah.
You know, the NBA is going to get 6 or 7, and we're the NFL. What the hell happened?
Yeah, well, it's timing is what happened. Sometimes you get timing at the perfect points of whenever your contract is up or your deal is up. I think about baseball. Baseball struck with all those RSNs at the perfect time, right? I forget how many years ago that was. And something that might have happened to baseball anyway didn't happen because of the RSN money and because of how badly each RSN or whatever was needed baseball and needed 162 games. We'd always hear like baseball literally eats up innings. Well, now that model is going away and baseball is in a completely different spot, you know, especially with people under 25. And we've been talking about this for how many years? Since really the mid 2000s.
Yeah.
But now it's finally coming home. And even like, I forget who always has fun with this on Twitter, but the Sunday morning baseball package, which was on Peacock last year. And like baseball's like, we're shopping this. And then it's like Roku's like, we'll take it. And now they have some national game that's earlier than all the other Sunday games. It's like, cool. I'd never watch a game that's not the Red Sox. I'm not even watching the Red Sox right now. So in some cases where you feel like, man, you got super lucky with the timing of that, which I do feel like is the case with basketball. But on the other hand, I think basketball is much better suited for wherever things are going than baseball is, right?
Yeah. And I also think, one of my subscribers wrote into me because I've been talking about this whole distinction between event sports and inventory sports and how the NFL is an event sport. It's a big event. And my contention is when it comes to holding popularity in this culture, there's so much noise, so many options. You want to be an event sport. You want to be like the UFC. You want to be like the NFL. You want to be like college football. But the guy wrote into me and he said, you're not really giving the inventory its due here. This is what's enabled the NBA to sell off different pieces of itself. So maybe the lesson is that baseball, that's too much inventory sport. That's too much inventory. You've gone crazy with it. You're getting lost in the shuffle. You're just part of the background of life right now. The NBA has had some of that, and its regular season has waned, but the amount of inventory it has, combined with enough eventiness of its playoffs and its cultural appeal and what you're talking about, where it's popular in the secondary way, it just allows the NBA to sell off pieces of itself. I thought ESPN, based on the reporting, seems like it's gotten a really good deal in this whole negotiation, but then the NBA still has yet more pieces of itself to sell off, and it almost creates this desperation bid between some companies that might be on the come, might be on the make, and a company like Warner Brothers, which is desperate, might go belly up if it cedes the property. So the right mix, the Goldilocks of event and inventory for the NBA, perhaps.
Well, somehow the NBA pulled off basically doubling the amount of money they're getting for these packages from a place like ESPN, but ESPN's getting less in the deal. That's been a lot of the reporting this week where ESPN might just give up Fridays. ESPN's always had Wednesdays, Fridays. They've had a Saturday night game. They've had some Sunday games, and they're just going to get less of that because that has to get spread around. But they're so desperate to still be involved in it. They're like, all right, fine. And, that's my question with TNT. And Bell and I talked about that a little bit last week because I think Warner is going to get bounced from this. I think that's how it's going to play out. I think it's going to be NBC/Peacock combined with Amazon will basically get what we know as the Warner side, and ESPN will give up a little bit to throw into that package. I don't know if Warner wanted to pay double what they were paying to get less stuff. It's like, if we're going to do that, are we still getting a conference finals every year? It's like, no, we're not sure about that anymore. I'm like, well, fuck that. We don't want to do that. Yeah. But when you have people over a barrel, that's when you can get them to do whatever. Like, I personally think it's an absolute catastrophe for Warner if they don't keep basketball. Because what are they at that point?
Yeah, it's like one of those Daryl Morey poison pill contracts from back in the day. That
NBC, the Omar Asik.
Yeah. NBC has put them into the Omar Asik kind of situation where you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. They're not a big company relative to these other bidders. And now you're seeing the strangeness of David Zaslav, who runs WBD. They're putting him on the TV during these playoff games, and he's waving, and he's next to Lloyd Bankfine of Goldman Sachs. It's almost like he's trying to say, look, I've got great credit. If we pay for these rights, we're not going to go belly up. Hey, if you want to get recklessly speculative, I wonder if NBC, Comcast put them in this position because there are rumors that Comcast would like to buy Warner Brothers. And maybe this is the thing that puts them towards the brink of bankruptcy. I don't know.
Like they're cutting their legs out. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just getting a little bit wild, a little bit Succession-esque plot when I throw that out there, but that's one of the rumors you hear bandied about. But it is a crazy situation for them at Turner where it looks like they can't afford this, but it looks like they also can't afford not to do it. And you wonder, to get back to this, how much of this is personality driven? How much of this is that Zaslav of Warner? He said, we don't need the NBA a few years ago. And you wonder if that
I bet he would suck
in.
that one back into his mouth and not have it live in the air.
Yeah. And well, now you see him at the games during this rights negotiation.
Like, I love the NBA. Yeah, it's great. You got Knicks. The other thing, there's another piece of this that there's so many things going on. This is why I want to do a segment when we have another. We're going to talk about refs in a second, but what's happening with the league sanctioned networks, which is also a piece of this, because they haven't reported this yet. But my guess is NBA TV is just going to probably cease to exist at some point, or it will just become a highlight thing, or it'll morph into NBA.com, which is already kind of happening. But you think about it, I remember when I was at Grantland, And the WWE launched their WWE channel, and they're like, we're bypassing all these people. We're going to own our shit ourselves. And it was like the final level of the RSNs. It's like, whoa, the pay-per-views are going to be on there? What? You're not going to have? And then as soon as things shifted where the rights became more valuable than owning your own stuff, they were also the first one to shift and be like, hey, Netflix, hey, Fox, hey, Peacock. And they started selling their content. I think what we're watching what's happening with the NFL Network, where they're just gutting it, you know?
Yeah.
They also have the ability anytime they want to sell a game for, it seems like between 75 million and 100 million, anytime they want, which at some point there's a law of diminishing returns with having the NFL Network and the fees you get from that from the cable systems versus, hey, Amazon, do you want 5 more games or 7 more games? And I think that's also happening with NBA and the NBA. Like, we've had all these playoff games on NBA TV. Why?
Yeah.
What's the point of that? Like, they could have sold those games a week ago. If there's some NBA TV game this week, they could have sold it to Amazon just to say, fuck it. Why not? I'm sure they have deals and their stuff that makes it. But don't you feel like that model is about to be past tense?
Definitely, and I think it sounded good to them back in the day, and maybe it had a little spark of life way back in the day when Gary Payton and Chris Webber and Ahmad Rashad on the NBA TV studio set.
Glorious days.
Oh, it was just wonderful. It's a bygone era. But yeah, sometimes you don't want to make all of your own stuff. I once saw somebody figure out how to make their own chicken sandwich from scratch. And I mean farming, and I mean raising the chicken and what the total cost is and everything else. I feel as though these leagues...
Was it Tom Brady? Who was it?
I think he was just a guy, but
okay.
Maybe that could be a secondary career for Tom Brady after the roast. Yeah. But I think for them, they realize that this is actually difficult and you need an infrastructure. And you saw that with NBA TV. They brought in Turner to do it for them because it's just not something that's easy to do yourself. And as you're talking about, if you're trying to sell these games, I mean, that's really what it's all about. I don't know if this term is ever going to catch on, but after Peacock had that NFL playoff game and made some money off of it, I call it the peacockification of sports, and it sucks for the consumer. I think we're just going to see
cockification. Like, I don't know.
The cockification.
Yeah.
The consumer is certainly getting cockified as they're paying a fee here and a fee there, in order to see a playoff game. But that definitely seems to be in the offing, especially if NBC has rights where, there's going to be a really big playoff game that you want to watch that's going to be on Peacock. And you're going to sign up, and either you'll be a committed Peacock customer or you'll forget about it and you'll just keep on paying the sub fees, and that's what they're counting on.
Also a fascinating way to find out how intense your audience is, both for the product and for teams.
Yeah.
Right? Knicks Pacers Game 5, only available on Peacock, guys. Okay, what do we got? Who's signing up? How many people are from like the tri-state area? How many people are from Indiana? And then they study all that data and they're like, whoa, that really drove our audience in New York. So then the NFL looks at that and goes, it did? Oh, we'll put a Giants game on there. And then you kind of go. But I just feel, especially as everybody, all these big companies, they're trying to get sleeker and sleeker. You have like a league like the NFL, 32 owners. They just want checks for stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like when the NBA expands and it's $9 billion for the two teams and each NBA owner splits $300 million, it's like, here's your check, $300 million. Whoa, thank you. I appreciate it. Same thing for these games. Peacock's like, there's $90 million for a Tuesday game after Martin Luther King Day. It's like, great. How much is that? It's $2.5 million. Oh, thank you. And that's what they care about. So I think they're going to dump these channels.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. And it's an indication of why Adam Silver apparently was renewing his contract a few months ago. Ultimately, it's about the money. And while I've certainly been critical of some of the things the league has done, I don't like how they've handled the All-Star game. I love the new prison ballification of the NBA, but that's, maybe for later on in the conversation. Yeah. Ultimately, for the owners, it's about the money. It's about the embedded growth principle. And Adam Silver appears to have made it rain. And it seems like he has really put the screws to David Zaslav, and he has found the necessary leverage during a rather chaotic moment for the league. So what a decade for the NBA.
Yeah, and we were going to get to this point that, I mean, I'm old enough to remember like when Nolan Ryan signed for $1 million a year. It was either Sports Illustrated or Inside Sports had one of those covers, and it was $1 million players, and are the salaries getting too high? It was like in 1979, 1980, somewhere in that stretch, and we had $1 million players, and it seemed like, I was a little kid, it seemed like so much money. You'd be like, this guy's making $1 million a year. It seemed like, we had no context of it. Now you think less than 50 years later, 45 years later, once the salary cap kicks in the way it's going to kick in, we're going to have a $100 million NBA player over the next decade, right? Because there's only 12 to 15 players on a team. So if the salary cap is the amount of money that goes to the players is going up by 7% every year for 8, 9, 10 years, that's going to lead to somebody signing a $750 million 5-year deal, something like that. That's where we're heading. Which I think is great. Kudos to them, but I'll be really interested to see how the fans respond to that.
I mean, it's a good bulwark against the Jonte Porter situation. If all the players are making at the baseline bottom $30 million a year, then you're not going to have any of that funny business. And I guess the details they're negotiating right now, it's about whether Anthony Edwards will be a $100 million player or Naz Reid will be a $100 million player. So there's going to be sticker shock. There's certainly going to be sticker shock. I think as far as the owners and everybody else within that business, they're going to be very happy with the results. Now, what it means for the NBA's future and how popular it's going to be, I mean, that's more stuff for people like ourselves who care about its cultural impact and its cultural imprint. And I think that's more up in the air.
Well, I did this at the top of the pod, but if Ant becomes the guy, you can't even put a price on what that means to the league. Like, if he legitimately becomes the guy, they don't have anybody under 30 who totally fits that bill. And we were in that situation in the late 90s, early 2000s, where they were dying for anybody to take over. And then it kind of eventually became some combination of Kobe and Shaq, then Kobe and LeBron, and they figured it out as the decade went along. If Ant becomes the guy, that makes a lot of this a lot easier. Having a signature guy that everybody knows and cares about, wanting to see if they make the playoffs every year. The other piece we didn't mention, how they included the WNBA in the deal and didn't split it out. And I asked some people, involved in this, like, why are they doing it that way? And the NBA's theory was, if we include the WNBA and you basically have to have all of it, for us, that's 320 days a year of basketball.
Yeah.
Like, you're adding the NBA and then all WNBA stuff. I mean, way back in the day, back when I used to make fun of the WNBA, we always felt like it was being force-fed to us like broccoli, and it was two different audiences. And I don't know if it's two completely different audiences anymore.
Oh, it poisoned the early relationship between the NBA and ESPN, because the executive over there at ESPN, I'm trying to remember if it was Shapiro, he was mad at David Stern. He didn't want Stern to force the WNBA upon him. He said, look, we like women's college basketball, but people are not watching this. And Stern was furious and he was livid. And he tried to go over, I think, Shapiro's head with Iger. And it was just a really toxic relationship on the basis of that aspect of the WNBA. Now with Caitlin Clark, I mean, there is some legitimate interest there. And
it's almost some of the stars they already had, that you could feel it changing the last couple of years. And then I think Caitlin's going to be the catalyst for it to blow up.
I mean, I think there's a potential of that. There's certainly a lot of interest in that happening. I don't know. I was so fascinated by when Klosterman was on your podcast and he was wondering if we're about to see the shift that happened with the NBA, where college basketball was bigger and then the NBA became bigger than college basketball as basketball professionalized. If something is going to happen like that with women's basketball, where it will go from more popular college to finally the WNBA will, make that leap and overtake. I don't think so, but that potential is there. I almost wish they broke out the WNBA rights just so I could, just see where they're at.
Right. And see who was desperate enough to overpay for it. Which is always the case with all of these sports rights come up. There's always somebody who really, 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 really needs it. And we're going to post basketball. UFC is going to be the next one. And UFC is just sitting there like, guys, please knock yourself out bidding on this basketball one because whoever doesn't get this is going to need us. Like at that point, Warner is going to need them. I think that's the one I think Netflix is waiting for. And we just saw it with the Brady roast. Netflix wants these live events that are in and out. They don't care about the inventory as much as what you were talking about earlier. They want like splash, and UFC is splash every 4 Saturdays. Huge things they can put on there, blow it out, put Netflix stars around the octagon, the whole thing. I think it makes way more sense for them. WNBA, they haven't figured out the schedule.
Yeah.
I think that's the killer for them is that basically the part that would really resonate when basketball's gone, that like 8 weeks, by the time football comes back, now all of a sudden you're going against football and it just feels like the playoffs get lost in a way that, and I don't know how they fix it. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, right? There might not be a way to fix it.
Yeah, I think the issue structurally with the WNBA is that it is a subsidiary of the NBA. And therefore, it's hard to figure out what's unique about yourselves because you're so much patterned off of the parent company. Yeah. I would have liked to have seen the WNBA try to be dramatically different, try to have a way different schedule, frankly, try to do some of the wackier Adam Silver big ideas, but it just didn't seem to happen that way. Except for the one thing they should have done, and maybe there's still time to do, that they didn't do from the outset, is just use the same team names. Like, why force people to learn about the Fever? Why not just have the W Pacers? I think that makes it so much easier to just resonate and cut across.
Like how in college where it'd be like the Lady Gamecocks.
Yeah.
I think they're close to figuring this out. But I wonder if the season should start before college basketball or during college basketball. And then they have the hockey model where like college basketball ends and the players just come right into a season. Or do you stagger it where it's like 2 halves? There's got to be some way where the season peaks when there's no NBA and no NFL. And that's how they win. They would argue that we're growing anyway, and there's people want multiple options. But, I think it's interesting. Women's college basketball took off basically by targeting those days when there was no men's college basketball, right? Yeah. That Friday Final Four became this event. And they had it forever. But I think once they really honed in on that, and then Sundays, and it was always, they were never competing against too much. And that was, I think, what tipped it. And now to me, it's like all one thing. Like you get to that Final Four weekend, It's just 4 straight days of basketball, and it's awesome.
Well, they've got an opportunity to make it all one thing, like you're saying, where you can just build momentum from the college to the pro. The NBA has this weird problem where they have, in theory, a free farm system in college basketball, but they've also got a competing business, and it's somehow both things, and it goes against them. And they don't have that advantage that football has. Football has the beautiful model where on Saturdays, we've got the college product, and on Sundays, we've got the pro product, and one will help the other and flow into the other. The NBA is in an awkward place with this where they don't care. They're, bathing in money currently, but they tried to make G League Ignite work, and they tried to replace the college basketball pipeline, and they were not able to do that. So, I think there's actually an easier pathway to making women's college basketball work for the WNBA than right now there is for college basketball to work for the NBA.
You're right. I wonder, so this ties into another passion point of mine that I know you and I have both talked to Steve Kerr about, the shorter NBA season. And I wonder if you're going to basically align the WNBA and the NBA from a selling rights standpoint, it would make sense to me to make the WNBA kind of lead into the NBA season. So you have the playoffs and the finals. Basically, that's like late September to October. And then the NBA starts like late October, early November, something like that, with a 72-game schedule instead of an 82-game schedule. The thing I don't get about the 82-game schedule is that literally nobody wants it.
Yeah.
Not one person. And when you talk to people about it, they're just like, yeah, it's too much money. That's it. But you're just getting so much fucking money from this new deal. This is the time to go to 72 games.
Yes, it should be seized upon as an opportunity. I don't know if they care enough to do it, but it should. And it is crazy, Bill, this whole thing where ESPN and TNT are both. I mean, ESPN, it almost seems like, look, we will pay you more money, but we want less product. There is something so paradoxical to that. It's almost like we just want the good stuff from you. We care about the conference finals. We want that. We care about the NBA finals. We want that one game a week, but we don't want all of it. We don't want all of the inventory. We want enough to be able to tell people that you've got to pay a sub fee because we've got the NBA. That's what we want. And then we want the tent pole, the big event that people are going to see because it's a huge game, but we don't want all of it. So there is this question of how do you make the regular season really work? I don't think they're going to do it, but are you aware of the Kevin Arnovitz model? And if you are, then how do you feel about it?
Tell me what it is.
It is a proposal that some within the league like. It was proposed by Kevin Arnovitz, who is at ESPN.com back in the day. That you've got
Kevin is. Jesus.
I know. I'm explaining to the to the listener who you should know who Kevin is because he's a fantastic writer. You might or might not agree with his whole big idea, but it would be a 44 game NBA season, twice a week, regular schedule, something like Tuesday and Thursday. And maybe you've got some sort of big one game showcase on the weekend. And the whole idea would be to eventize the NBA, where if you're an NBA fan, you know exactly when your team is playing. You know they're playing in the way you do with the NFL. Personally, I feel like the model, though it sounds radical, I think it would make the NBA just huge. It would just make it more popular. I also know why it won't happen. Because they're getting a bunch of money anyway, so why take a big risk?
Yeah, but you could have a modified version of that if you cut to 72. Like, they're going to go to 2 more teams, so it'll be 32 teams. You do 4 8-team divisions, right? So you play everyone in the other conference twice. That's 32 games. Then you play everyone in your conference 3 times. So that's 15 games total. That's 45. So that gets you to 77, right? 77 is at least better than 82. But now if we wanted to we could actually go a little lower than that. Now it's like you play everybody in the other division in your conference 2 times. That's 16. Now I'm at 48. Then I play everybody in my division 3 times. That's another 21. Now I'm at 69. In the 69 game schedule, which would be hilarious. People get a lot of jokes out of that. But somewhere between 69 and 77 feels like the right number. And I just think about like the plan, how we kind of engage with the NBA around, I don't know, like 3 weeks left. We're like, oh shit, Golden State might not make the playoffs. To be able to speed that up a little sooner with more stakes. And like, if you have one injury, that could really matter. I just think it would make the league more interesting, but they're not going to listen to us.
They might. But they probably won't, but they might in that case because that's not a huge sacrifice to get there. And there is some proof of concept. The most watched NBA season post Jordan, and I don't think anybody would have anticipated it. It was the lockout season of 2010, 2011, I think.
No, 11, 12. That season was awesome. 11, 12. 66 games. Yeah. And it was it was actually just hoops every night. It was great.
Yeah. And there was no rollout. You couldn't promote it. They hastily put together their greatest ad, which the I want to be with you forever or whatever it was with the bad CGI that still had an emotional impact, merging the players from yesteryear with the players today. But the crazy thing about it is when baseball had its strike, it took a huge dip in popularity, but the NBA had something equivalent. And because I believe they had fewer games, it just whet the appetite more. So I think at some level, people kind of know how many games you have and calibrate their interest according to it. And so I think if you did cut it by what you're talking about, I do think that you would be more rewarded by more interest in the league. I don't know if any owner wants to take that risk when they've got the money in hand, but I do think that's how it would work out.
Well, one other thing about that lockout season, which is relevant to the time right now, LeBron, year 2 Miami.
Yeah.
Durant, OKC taking off. Kobe still circling around with the Lakers. Derrick Rose taking off in Chicago. Carmelo in New York. The old Celtics team. There was just a lot of fun teams that year and a lot of fun storylines. And then Dirk in Dallas trying to defend the title. And I think where we're heading toward in the mid 2020s, especially now that we are establishing Minnesota as a real new contender, we're establishing OKC. Luka and Kyrie might be able to play together. You got the Celtics. You have whatever the fuck's going on in Phoenix, and you'll always have the Lakers. And now there's a lot of players at the table. Wait, before we go, we got to talk referees really fast.
Oh, yeah.
So this was the biggest rule change we've seen affect the competitiveness of a season that I can remember in the NBA since 2004 or 5 when they headed into that 04-05 season and got rid of the hand check and all that stuff. You've been fascinated by it. You've written about it a couple of times. Most fascinating thing to you about this?
It's that we don't even know perhaps who's good or who is optimized for this. I think Haralabob tweeted that he has to recalibrate everything with the San Quentin rules, as he put it, where I'm looking at what happens to Denver right now. And I'm looking at this team and I can tell something is weird about them. Something is off. Jamal Murray's throwing things at refs. So maybe if we played the season out without the rule change, maybe they would come apart and they wouldn't have a good title defense. At the same time, I don't know. Maybe they were just well situated for the old rules and the Timberwolves are well situated for these new rules and this prison ballification or whatever you want to call it, this whistle swallowing where I just looked it up. I think defensive efficiency, there was no team I think the lowest team was at 104.6 for last postseason, and there are 4 teams right now in the postseason with a better defensive efficiency. I don't even need to give people stats because everybody sees it. Everybody sees Jamal Murray getting his leg humped all the way down the court. Everybody can see that it's a different kind of situation right now. And so that's part of what's interesting to me is just, I don't know who is best situated for this. I've heard from people that, Luka's kind of good with these rule changes. He's just big. You're not going to throw him off. So maybe they're better than we thought they were. And it's something that is completely changed the game. And maybe this is another thing we could credit Adam Silver for. This is bad process, good result. I mean, generally it's not good to have a secret rule change in the aftermath of your TV meetings at All-Star during a rights negotiation. But I can't disagree with the result. I love the result. I didn't like the cheapening of the sport. I didn't like 145 to 135. I think they're just like there's sort of an ideal length to the season. There's an ideal score. There's a platonic ideal. And there's nothing more beautiful to me than 100 to 101 playoff game. And they've got to refine it. Maybe you can't have guys clawing each other's eyes out, and they've got to figure out something in the middle and a happy medium. But I generally think this has been a great reform for the league and a direction I really approve of, even if it was arrived at in a particularly shady way.
I remember Rasul and I, because we were doing pods about it pretty early, because within the first 9-10 days, it was like, this is different. Okay, who's going to win from this? And I think Minnesota was one of the first 2 teams we talked about. Because we were like, man, if these are going to be the rules, this is great for Minnesota. I think we said the Knicks. I think maybe we talked about the Lakers just because they know how to, with LeBron and Davis and the fact that LeBron it's the one guy who still gets calls. But yeah, it turned out to be this fortuitous event for Minnesota. But I have to ask you, what's your hottest take for why they did this?
My hottest
take? Give me
take?
The rational Ethan take, but you're known to whip some hot takes around from time to time. What's your hottest take for why they did this in February?
My hottest take would just be the conspiracy take. It would be that one of the TV broadcasters said, look, you got to stop this craziness. We'll give you the $2.6 billion or whatever, but you've got to stop this now and show that you're loyal to us and you'll be responsive to us. We want to know that when we say jump, you ask how high. And that's my take. Do I know that happened? I know that Adam was humiliated by the All-Star game, and I know that there was some sort of event with Larry Bird and Bob Costas where they started cracking on the modern NBA and the lack of defense, and they were getting belly laughs in the room.
Yeah.
And there was a bit of an embarrassment factor. And everybody knows that the All-Star game isn't a real game, but it sort of highlighted how the game had kind of become like an all-star game. And so, yeah, the two hot takes are that it was demanded by a broadcaster, or the other hot take is that it was all Adam going back to his hotel room, steaming and going, fine, fuck it, fuck you guys, we're changing the rules. Sick of Trae Young whipping his head back and getting a call. Either one I like, either conspiracy theory I like, and I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive.
I love the Adam goes back to his hotel room after the All-Star game, just pissed off, sending emails to the director of officiating. It's like, all right, execute Operation Prison Ball. And then just that night, the thing was sent. He just had it, just being pissed, because he was pissed when he was handing out the trophy. And I don't think it's a coincidence that everything shifted right after that. But it's one of those, I would say, one of the top 2 or 3 things he's done since he's been commissioner. The way he pulled off the Clippers Sterling thing is probably still number 1 for me, because that was a real crisis and he did it. But this is up there, like really realizing something is wrong with the league. We can't wait till after this season to fix it. And we're just fucking fixing it, letting the players figure out how to play with the new rules.
Oh, rule changes are huge. It's a huge aspect of what a commissioner can do. What was one of the biggest things David Stern did? It was what led to the 7 seconds or less revolution, where they had to go the other way, where the platonic ideal, it was way too much the other way. And instead of 145 to 135, it was 75 to 72. And they had to figure it out. A lot of the
66
coaches,
to 61 in the playoffs that year. That was a final in Pacers Pistons, I think.
Oh, was that the Reggie Miller getting a shot blocked by Prince game, or maybe that was? It was in that. It was in that era. It was in that time. So it's almost like when you're running the Fed, where sometimes you got to cut interest rates, sometimes you got to raise interest rates, and as a commissioner, I think that's a valuable thing that you can do, because these sports, man, they're just their rules, and we talk about it like there's just basketball, with the 96 Bulls beat the Nuggets of today.
Yeah.
But the game is the rules. The game is the rules of the game. And if you change the rules, you change the game. And the NBA changed the rules, and the game has been changed, and I think to a better end. I think these playoff games are just great theater, even as the Knicks, as they did back in the 1990s, try to make them as ugly as possible.
Yeah, it's like even in the mid-2000s, it wasn't just the hand check rule, and it wasn't just they switched the zone defenses. I thought 2 of the subtle things they did that were super smart were the 16 seconds to cross the ball over half court instead of 14, which doesn't sound like anything, right? It's 2 seconds, but there's just a pace sometimes. And when I watch it, sometimes I feel like the guys aren't going to get over. Brunson's the master of that. You always feel like Brunson's going to get an 8-second violation. He barely gets it over in time.
Yeah.
And then resetting the shot clock on an offensive rebound, I think, was huge. Because these teams will get offensive rebounds, and especially if you want to play with a slower pace, you just pull it back out and you rip off another 18, 20 seconds, and it sucked. Now you get that rebound, you pull it out, there's 11 seconds left already, and you got to come up with another shot. I think just those 2 things alone, plus the hand check, I thought, it's one of those things where you think, why didn't they always do this? Which is how I feel now about reviewing block charge calls. That would be my number 1 draft pick for get this the fuck out of basketball. Just take it out.
Yeah.
We're going to be 50-50 probably long term with the 2,000 block charge calls we review every season. Just let's say coin flip. Okay, get him the fuck out. I don't want to watch another review of him.
Yeah, I would feel similarly. I feel that way about replay review in general, but this goes back to the TV incentives and the money. Why sometimes what's good for fans isn't good for everybody. There's a perverse incentive with the replay review at the end of these games because people get so frustrated. There was that crazy end to Warriors Lakers in the regular season that dragged on and on and on. But the perverse aspect of it is that the end of the game is when the most people are watching. So even if you're drawing it out and boring people, you're going to get a bigger number often when that happens. So that's going to be a hard thing to argue against.
Oh, this is a good one. So your conspiracy is this drags on the higher rating for longer?
Yes, it draws out the portion of the game when people are watching.
Think of that?
People are watching the most, which is unfortunate because I'm not sure the juice is worth the squeeze. I think it would be better to have European style games that are just boom, boom, boom at the end. I would want replay review gone in general. I liked it when it was imperfect back in the day, but given that perverse incentive, I'm not sure we're going to really get there.
That's another Adam hot take about the rule change, by the way, that he was realizing we were going to get our asses kicked in the Olympics and they had to fix this now because we're going to get to FIBA and these guys were just going to be like, wait, what? I just got knocked on my drive and you didn't call it. So he was trying to condition them to do it. All right, before we go, give me your number one hottest media take right now.
Oh my God. Do I have a hot
Give me something that you just pulled out of the microwave and you burnt your fingers on it. Anything ESPN related?
Well, I said that I thought the ESPN got the best deal. I don't know if that's really a hot take. I'm trying to wonder.
Not a hot take.
That's
Jesus.
not a take. I think it's a good take. They finagled it. Now, I just don't know what a hot take is necessarily, other than that maybe all the ratings are fake. I'll say that much. As a ratings watcher, watcher, it is totally unpredictable in both directions. There are some games where I used to be able to predict it, and I would talk about it with Ryan Glass-Steagall of the New York Post, and we would predict it. We can't predict it anymore. It's all over the map. And so my theory is as they've changed the rating system where they've added out-of-home viewership, where they used to not count you if you watched in an airport or a hospital, they now have all these new counting systems, which gave everybody like a double-digit percentage boost for all of sports almost. I feel like combined with that and how all the different streaming services are now incorporated, it goes both ways where sometimes I go, wow, that's way fewer people than I would have thought, or wow, that's way more people than I would have thought. I've called it the great veganing. This is just one of my many terms that is not going to catch on that I'll try out in the podcast as I try to make fetch happen. But I think that we are entering in general an era where we just don't know how popular anything is. And I will miss the days of just knowing, because when we combine sort of how Nielsen is noodling around with new metrics and new scoring systems, with how the streaming companies don't even want to tell us how many people watched. I would love to know all the numbers on the Tom Brady roast. I don't know if we'll ever know it. We're just entering a period of time where we just won't know how popular things are.
You still see it happens with YouTube and podcasts too, because people can buy YouTube views and people can game the podcast system and the rankings and the charts. And there's all these different tricks for that. But yeah, it's the age of disinformation and confusing information. I have no idea. Like when we get to the finals, the only thing I know for sure is they're going to release stuff that Countdown had the highest ratings it's ever had. That Game 4 of the NBA Finals had the highest rating for Game 4 in 10 years. Everything will be the highest, and I just don't know if I believe any piece of it.
No, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because it seems like there's so much competing media out there, and there are only so many young people who can sit still and watch a game in its entirety, and more people are cord cutting. So it would be hard for these things to get more popular. But ultimately, I'm just not sure how much we'll really know going forward. So welcome to the great veganing. We'll get some statistics, and we'll just have to kind of see for ourselves a bit and see how much people pay for things.
The Great Veganing sounds like a new Apple TV drama with like, I don't know. It's like Jason Segel. It's his comeback to Apple TV. Oh, no. I don't know. Peter Gallagher's in it. It's Great Veganing. They're set in the Midwest.
I think the whole Apatow crew winds up in that one.
In the Great Veganing? I like it.
Yeah,
it's a comeback.
It's the writer's workshop in the Midwest, and all of these people want to get popular again now that books aren't being published as much. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out what the Great Veganing actually is, other than not very catchy. But, I try.
All right. You can read Ethan's Substack, which is very good. Always Yeah, I mean, you have to subscribe to it, but that's the world we live in 2024. Sometimes if it's good, you got to subscribe to it. But I always respect how you went on your own and built an audience. I thought it was pretty cool.
Oh, well, thank you. And I apologize for cockifying the audience by charging a sub fee. Thanks, Bill.
All right, good to see you. Thanks.